Good day, my name is Nico Kruger. I am a double bass player and teacher in the Gauteng area of South Africa. So the title of my presentation today is the first double bass lesson, Concepts and Considerations. So the first experience of anything we do in life is extremely important. It can easily be a make or break experience. So what happens early on when you do something can determine whether you keep on doing it or not. So the journey starts before the first lesson. I'm just getting my notes a bit closer. The journey starts before the first lesson. So I'm assuming that you already have made an arrangement to have a student, you're either at a school or some kind of a project, or you are a private teacher. Point number one, the parents are your allies. So you have to make sure that you have a good relationship with the parents of your student, because that makes the whole thing much easier. Okay, so now we can move on to the instruments. Instrument size and quality. So assuming that you have access to an instrument, the next issue, of course, is the size. And I just have to mention here that if someone phones me and asks for bass lessons, my first question would be, do you have a double bass? It sounds very simple, but often they don't. More often than not, they don't. So, for children especially, you need a very small instrument. So it's much better to have a smaller double bass, which fortunately we are able to get these days. So you can check the physique of the child. So I'm presuming that you have an interview, maybe at the school. You can meet the child and the parent, so you can have a look at the child. We're talking about the physique, in other words, tall or short. You're also looking at the size of the hands, and you're also looking at the arms length, the length of the arms. So let's start with hand size. So this determines how well they will be able to reach the notes. So, you can think in your mind, the distance from the E to the F sharp on the D string in first position. That sounds quite simple, but for a lot of kids, that's quite hard to do. So if the hand is really too small, they're going to struggle to do that. And of course you could say we have to have a smaller instrument where they can reach the notes. That would be the ideal, but it's not always possible. So hand size for me is important. Then the next thing I check is the length of the arm. So what is important here is bow placement. So you can determine the size of the instrument like this. So while you're not going to give them a bow, but you can see how far they can reach down, and obviously we need to have a very natural arm position, not too far outstretched and not too much bent up, because that's one of the things we're trying to teach from the beginning, is to have a very good and a natural, relaxed bow arm. So it starts from the moment when you meet the child or the student. Okay, so if you don't have an instrument that is of the ideal size, you can adjust the height of the instrument up or down, depending on the length of the arm. If the arm is a little bit too short, maybe you have to put the bass up. You have to take the in pin out, put the bass up, so that the student can reach easily. The downside of this, of course, is then that possibly they would have to reach up to reach the first position, which could create some tension, and it's not what we want. Something that you can do to counter this is not to start in first position, but to start in fourth position with the first finger on the D in fourth position. And the book that you could use for that is actually Suzuki Method Book 1, where the pieces, where the fingerings are given. So you can play the whole of Twinkle, for instance, in fourth position. Also, it gives you a visual reference. Then, you know, you could, you could look at your hand, and then you can form a mental picture of what the hand position should look like. And then when you move back to first position or to the lower positions, you don't really have to look because you already settled that hand position. So the next point is instrument price and quality. Encourage whoever is buying the instrument to buy the best quality. It is a problem for us in South Africa that double basses are very expensive. Just to give you an example, I think an entry-level double bass will cost you 10 to 15 times the amount of money that an entry-level violin will cost you. And I'm talking very basic here. I'm talking about a laminate instrument coming from a factory. So a good idea is to keep an eye on the selling groups, or the selling websites online, and also on Facebook. I have seen some bargains on there. Usually they are Chinese factory instruments, but you can still get them for cheaper than what you would buy them new. The next point is set up. So even that entry-level bass, which I can't describe as a cheap bass because, you know, we're talking quite a few thousand rands, maybe even up to 20,000 rands for an entry-level double bass. You're taking that entry-level double bass to a professional luthier. The height of the strings are very important. If the strings are too high, the young students find it very difficult to press them down, and that influences their tone production early on. So you want to make it easier for them to play the double bass. The other thing that needs to be checked out is the fingerboard, that it is shaped correctly. Okay, so we've got that. Before we have even had the first lesson, we have considered a few issues. Okay, so now we're going to the actual first lesson. So the lesson objects, the object lesson, or what shall I say, objectives, let me use a better word, objectives for me in the first lesson are twofold. One is to familiarize the student with the double bass, with the instrument somewhat, because the double bass is very big. It can be very awkward if you encounter it for the first time. You know, how to hold, where must you stand, what must you do. So familiarization is important. The second thing I'd like to try and achieve is for that student to be able to play a piece immediately after the first lesson. So in that first lesson, they're already going to make music. That is very important because it gives them an experience of making music. You can play with them. It can be a simple duet. You can, if you're able to play piano, you can accompany a simple open string piece, which you can teach them in a minute or two to play, and they have that experience of making music from the very first lesson. I like to do that. I'm not always successful with that, but that's my aim. Okay, so where do we start? Let's start with the familiarization, excuse my pronunciation, of the instrument. So you can do several things. That you can start by teaching them the names of the 4 strings, making sure that they know which string is G, which is D, and so on. That's one thing you could do. You could let them try and make a sound, even if the bow holds crooked, or they don't hold the bass correctly or sit correctly. Let them try and something, make a sound. Most students enjoy that in the first lesson. It could also include things like how to put the double bass into its cover, how to take it out again, and if you've got a parent there, you may even have to teach the parent how to put the double bass in their cars. The next issue is whether to sit or stand. For young students, I'm talking about, let's say, under 10 years old. I've had students from 6 years old. And for the young students, I would definitely recommend, I would definitely recommend sitting. So you need a low stool, preferably with a round seat, where the student can sit with both feet on the floor. And the way to do that, I will adjust my camera slightly and try and demonstrate like I'm sitting here. I'm putting both feet flat on the floor, and the double bass rests on the inside of my left leg. So it's very comfortable. You don't have to support the double bass. You can still reach all the notes. I played like that for a long time. These days I prefer to put one leg up, which you can do if your stool allows you to do it. The most important thing with sitting is the posture. If you have both feet on the floor, you have a bigger chance of having your spine in a natural position. The old bass players used to sit on very high stools. They played very well, but the way they sat wasn't very healthy. Some of them had really crooked spines, the spines in a crooked way, and that can lead to severe back pain. So something that you can start right from the first lesson is to try and teach them to have good posture. Okay, let's go to standing. If you don't have a stool, yes, the kids can stand too. I like to stand. If you see, I'm going to move a little bit back. I stand right next to the double bass, and I let the bass, let me adjust my camera just slightly. I let the double bass lean slightly against me. So you can see I'm not holding. I'm not feeling 100% safe, but I am balancing the double bass. In other words, I'm not holding it. I'm balancing it against my body. This way, you can still reach everything. You can bow. The only drawback is this E string. You might have to turn the double bass slightly just so that you can reach the E string. Even with this method, I would advocate that you have both feet flat on the floor and that your feet are slightly apart, and so that you stand basically naturally. So there you go. I'm balancing my double bass against me, and that's what I'd like to teach my children, so that they don't have to hold the bass. The left hand's not holding the bass, the left hand is playing, is pressing down notes. Okay, that's the sitting and standing issue. I think we could have, amongst bass players, a long discussion just about that. And I'm prepared to have that discussion if any of the bass players on this convention are interested. Okay. All right, so then we get to what is actually the first piece. what are you going to, you've now taught them how to sit or stand or hold the bass. What is the first piece? What is the first piece going to be? I suggest that we use the waltz, which is the very first book, in the first book of Sheila Nelson and Catherine Elliott, which is called The Essential Method for Strings, and the double bass book. So it's a simple piece with a quarter note in each bar, and I'm going to start pizzicato. I'm going to adjust again slightly so that I'll play a little bit higher. So I'm just going to do it on the D string for now. There are other notes if you play the actual piece. So I'm going to put my finger on the string and pull, and then make a circle. And I'm going to count in 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So on the 3, I'd like to have the finger back on the string. Pull, 2, 3. Pull. So why am I making a circle? Well, that is described in the book, but the reason is it's connected with the bowing action. So you are already learning a good bowing action. You are a good bowing arm. That's what you're trying to teach right from the beginning. And then when we start with the bow, it's similar action. I'm just going to adjust again so that you can see. So now I've got to put the bow on the string and pull. So you've got to put the bow on the string and then pull, and then make your circle. 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 2. So you can see there's a similarity between the pizzicato and the arco. Okay, so the next thing we can discuss is the actual bow hold. You know, you might not get to them actually playing arco in the first lesson. However, sometimes you can do that. You can put the instrument down and you could just talk about the bow and how to hold the bow. I like to use the analogy of a pencil. So the pencil analogy is also in the Sheila Nelson, Catherine Elliott book. The pencil analogy, but in that book it's French bow. I've changed it. My version is for German bow. So, like you hold a pencil, and that's where I'm going to put the stick of the bow between those two fingers, or slightly on top of the stick. And the other principle is for me a circle. So I try to make a circle, because what do we want? We want the bow hand to be round. We want a round shaped bow hand. So I can say, take the bow like this, put it in your hand. I like to put it right against my hand. You know, I know there are other ways of doing it, and like I said, maybe as bass players we could have a discussion about this separately. But in any case, let's put it and then close my hand. And now I've got my pencil there. I've got my circle. So if you emphasize that a lot, you'll find that your young students have a very good bow hold for German bow. Of course, the little finger at the bottom of the frog, you can try and put the third finger the middle finger on the side of the stick, and then you have a good bow hold. So that's a very easy way to teach a bow hold. We can still talk about the position of the thumb. There are quite a few variants to this way of doing it, and I think they're all valid because they all have proponents, people who play very well, who do it like that or this. So we can't really knock any other way of doing it. But I think if we stick to a round bow hold, a round hand, then we've already got half the battle won. Okay, right. So I said I wanted the students to play a piece. So you could take this very same waltz, and whether they're playing arco or pizzicato, you could play an accompaniment on a simple improvised accompaniment on the piano, consisting of very basic harmonies, and play with them and make them try and keep the time. You could also use the bass part for this in the Tetratunes. I think it's called Tetratunes, a little pink book, also by Sheila Nelson and Catherine Elliott. And you could play the part where you have to play a tune with it. So there's already one piece that you could play. Another one is on page 3 of the same book, just with open A and A, D, and then you can play, and then the student plays, and so on, and then you change to the D and the G. So if I do all of that, I think I have reached my objectives of my lesson objectives of the first lesson. I want to conclude my talk by just saying, using the word kindness, and that you must remember to be kind when you teach, when you work with kids. Be kind, be friendly, be fun. Okay, how you make a person feel is almost more important than what you're trying to teach them. And I can say, well, as a person who have children myself, that the moment you lose your patience, you start screaming maybe and shouting, well, you've lost that child, you've lost that person. That's the end of that lesson. You're not going to teach them anything else. So even if you feel quite frustrated, and you have to find a kind way and an encouraging way to try and get your students to improve. I just want to say thank you very much for listening to me. I welcome any comments, any criticisms. If you want to take me on anything, I'm always open for any discussion, and you're welcome. Thank you very much. And I also want to thank Marichen for creating this whole platform and for giving us all a chance to do something. Thank you very much.